The Battle of Adobe Walls, fought in June 1874, has often been romanticized as a tale of resilience, where a small group of buffalo hunters triumphed against a larger force of Kiowa, Cheyenne, and Comanche warriors. However, the lesser-known Staked Plains War of 1877 deserves equal, if not greater, recognition for its daring and its devastating consequences for the Comanche people. Unlike the Battle of Adobe Walls, the Staked Plains War was an independent campaign, waged without military backing, and ultimately culminated in the grim confrontation at Pocket Canyon. For the Comanche, these events marked the closing chapters of their storied history as formidable defenders of their homeland. The campaign, led by the buffalo hunters, was not just a skirmish but a calculated effort to dismantle the last remnants of the Comanche's warlike power. It was a campaign that tested their resolve against overwhelming odds, but its results came at a heavy cost. The defeat in the Battle of Pocket Canyon stripped the Comanche of their ability to resist further encroachment, bringing an end to centuries of resistance against settlers and government forces. This campaign was not merely a clash of arms. It was the culmination of years of relentless pressure on the Comanche way of life. By 1877, the buffalo, the lifeblood of the Plains tribes, had been nearly exterminated, leaving the Comanche struggling to adapt to a rapidly changing world. Their defeat was not just a loss on the battlefield, but a signal of the profound and irrevocable transformation of the Plains. The bravery of the Comanche warriors, their refusal to surrender, and their fierce defense of their land deserve to be remembered not as a footnote to history, but as a testament to their enduring spirit. The Staked Plains War and the Battle of Pocket Canyon represent not just a military campaign, but a pivotal moment in the broader story of Native resistance and resilience. The conflict between the buffalo hunters and the Native American tribes, particularly the Comanche, was rooted in a deep and enduring resentment. The near-extermination of the great buffalo herds by the hunters was not just an ecological catastrophe, but an existential blow to the tribes, who relied on the buffalo for food, shelter, and spiritual sustenance. This wanton destruction was viewed as a deliberate attack on their way of life, leaving bitterness and hostility between the two groups. The buffalo were more than just animals to the Plains tribes. They were a lifeline, a symbol of survival, and a sacred gift from the Creator. By the summer of 1876, the devastation of the buffalo herds had reached its peak. What had once been a vast sea of life on the Great Plains was now reduced to scattered remnants, and only in the Texas Panhandle could enough buffalo still be found to sustain the hunters' relentless quest for hides. Following the herds, the hunters, accompanied by traders, moved into this last refuge of the buffalo. Among them was Charles Rath, a prominent trader from Dodge City, who set up a trading post on Double Mountain Creek, a tributary of the Brazos River. To the east lay the Comanche Reservation, where the government expected the Comanche to remain passive and peaceful. However, the scars of the 1874 war lingered, and many Comanche warriors, though officially subdued, remained unconvinced of the white man's ultimate authority. Their spirit had not been fully broken, and their lands, culture, and survival remained under constant threat. Adding to their resentment was the government's failure to fulfill its promises. Rations were slow to arrive, leaving many Comanche families hungry and desperate. Meanwhile, reports of ongoing slaughter of the buffalo, their buffalo, reached them. These were the same animals they had been assured would be protected. Such betrayals deepened the mistrust and anger of the Comanche people, who saw the extermination of the buffalo not as an accident of progress, but as a calculated effort to dismantle their independence and sever their connection to the land. For the Comanche, the buffalo's destruction symbolized more than loss. It was a direct assault on their identity and a deliberate strategy to force submission. Yet, despite these hardships, many among them remained defiant, holding on to the hope that their resilience and connection to the land might one day allow them to rise again. The Comanche people, one of the great warrior tribes of the Plains, grew increasingly restless as their way of life faced unrelenting challenges. For generations, they had stood as fierce defenders of their homeland, earning a reputation that even General Richard I. Dodge acknowledged when he described them as the most cunning, the most mischievously artful of all the United States Indians. Their warriors had waged a constant war against Mexico for over 2 centuries, navigating the mountain passes of Chihuahua with the same mastery as the rolling lands of their Red River country. When Texas declared its independence, the Comanche directed their ire toward the Texans, whom they viewed as a new threat to their territory. Yet they maintained a distinction between Texans and Americans, often regarding the latter with less hostility due to prior peaceful interactions. Among their most notable acts of defiance was the sacking of Parker's Fort in northern Texas, a raid that became legendary. Under the leadership of Pita Nocona, also known as the Wanderer, the Comanche overwhelmed the fort, leaving devastation in their wake. During this raid, a young girl named Cynthia Ann Parker, the 13-year-old granddaughter of John Parker, after whom both the fort and later the city were named, was taken captive. Cynthia's life would become a symbol of the intertwining histories of the Comanche and the settlers. She was eventually married to Pita Nocona, bearing him 3 children during her years among the Comanche. Her eldest son, Quanah Parker, would rise to become one of the most significant figures in Comanche history. Quanah Parker, adopting his mother's name by Comanche custom, became the last great chief of his people. He guided the Comanche through one of the most turbulent transitions in their history, from fierce resistance to life on a reservation. The town of Quanah, Texas, stands as a testament to his legacy, a reminder of the resilience and adaptability of the Comanche people in the face of immense change. It is no surprise that the proud and warlike Comanche would resist the constraints imposed on them. By December 1876, the conditions at Fort Sill had become unbearable for a band of Comanches led by Black Horse, also known as Tuukama. With 170 warriors and their families, they left the reservation and set out toward the Staked Plains, a region tied deeply to their ancestral identity. The winter journey was fraught with danger, as 2 troops of cavalry attempted to track them down. However, a heavy and unexpected snowfall concealed their trail, allowing the group to evade capture. By winter's end, Black Horse and his band found refuge in Thompson's Canyon, a hidden haven within the rugged escarpment of the Staked Plains. This location, surrounded by plentiful game and shielded from the harsh elements, offered a temporary reprieve from their pursuers. Its remoteness ensured that even the buffalo hunters who scoured the plains remained unaware of their presence. In late February 1877, a few young Comanche warriors ventured out from the canyon to scout the surrounding area. Their prowl brought them into contact with a buffalo hunter's camp near the Red River. John F. Cook and Rankin Moore, camped with the Benson outfit, were the first to encounter the Comanche scouts. One of the warriors attempted an ambush, aiming a shot at Cook. The attempt failed, and the warrior retreated under a hail of bullets from Cook and Moore. This skirmish, though brief, unsettled the buffalo hunters, who quickly spread warnings to neighboring camps. The gravity of the situation deepened as reports of further attacks came in. Later that evening, word arrived that Marshal Sewell, a well-known buffalo hunter whose camp was near the escarpment, had been killed. On the same day, Bill Devon's camp was raided. Although his men managed to escape with their lives and weapons, the Comanche seized their ammunition and supplies, striking a significant blow to the hunters' resources. The date, February 22, 1877, Washington's birthday, marked not just a celebration for the settlers, but also a grim reminder of the growing tension and conflict between the hunters and the Comanche. Rath's Store, nestled along Double Mountain Creek, stood as a natural gathering point for buffalo hunters on the Texas frontier. When word of danger spread, hunters from across the region rushed to the post, seeking safety and coordination. Among those who carried the warnings was Pat Garrett, a rugged and resourceful Texan. Garrett, known for his endurance, rode tirelessly across the plains, alerting distant camps of the rising threat posed by the Comanche warriors. This same Pat Garrett would later etch his name into history as the sheriff who ended the infamous outlaw Billy the Kid's career in Lincoln County, New Mexico. By the time the hunters assembled at Rath's, their numbers had swelled to nearly 300 men. Recognizing the need for decisive action, they convened a council of war to determine their next steps. The first order of business was to confirm the grim rumors about Marshal Sewell, a respected buffalo hunter who had reportedly fallen to the Comanche. A group of 18 volunteers was dispatched to Sewell's camp to uncover the truth. When they arrived, the scene confirmed their worst fears. Sewell's body, scalped and mutilated, lay as a stark reminder of the dangers lurking on the plains. The hunters solemnly buried him, knowing that his death would fuel their resolve. They returned to Rath's store with heavy hearts, prepared to unite against the challenges that lay ahead. Among the colorful characters who frequented Rath's store was Limpy Jim Smith, the bartender. Smith, a man with a past as rugged as the Texas frontier itself, was a former road agent from Montana. He had narrowly escaped the vigilantes who dismantled the notorious Plummer gang, carrying a bullet in his leg for the rest of his life as a reminder of those dangerous days. Despite his rough history, Smith was known for his unwavering nerve and courage, qualities that earned him respect among the buffalo hunters. Recognizing the growing threat from the Comanche warriors and the need for unity, Smith boldly proposed that the hunters organize themselves into a cohesive force. His suggestion, however, sparked tension among the group. Tom Lumpkins, a hunter with a strong personality of his own, dismissed the idea with a sarcastic remark, declaring that he hadn't lost any engines and had no intention of hunting them. The comment ignited a sharp exchange of words between Lumpkins and Smith, laying bare the divisions among the hunters. The animosity between the two men would fester, eventually culminating in a deadly confrontation. Just a month later, their rivalry ended in a gunfight, with Lumpkins losing his life. This tragic outcome served as a stark reminder of the volatility of the times, where survival often depended not only on standing together against external threats, but also on managing conflicts within. The majority of buffalo hunters, hardened by the harsh realities of frontier life, favored direct action against the Comanche rather than relying on the military for assistance. The mere suggestion of appealing to the army was met with scorn and laughter. These men, accustomed to surviving through their own grit and resourcefulness, were confident in their ability to handle the task themselves. 45 hunters volunteered for the expedition, a number deemed sufficient for the mission. Among them was Big Hank Campbell, an experienced Indian fighter with a complex and controversial history. Campbell had played a leading role in the 1875 Sapa Creek Massacre, where a band of Cheyennes was decimated by buffalo hunters and soldiers in northern Kansas, a grim reminder of the relentless violence that had marked the plains for years. Campbell's reputation for leadership and combat experience made him the natural choice as commander of the expedition. Supporting him as leaders were Limpy Jim Smith, known for his nerve and pragmatism, and Joe Freed, who commanded respect among the hunters. The expedition wasted no time. By the next day, they were on the move. 30 hunters rode on horseback, while 15 walked alongside the wagons, which carried essential supplies, including 250 rounds of ammunition for every man. Their preparations reflected their determination and readiness for a prolonged confrontation. Among the group were individuals whose skills added crucial support to the expedition. Jose, a Mexican scout fluent in English, had served under General Mackenzie in 1874 and possessed an intimate knowledge of the terrain. Ben Jackson, as quartermaster, managed the distribution of grain, ensuring the men and horses were provisioned. Shorty Woodson, a former druggist and the tallest, slimmest man on the range, took responsibility for the medicine supply, ready to tend to the inevitable injuries of the campaign. This self-organized, highly prepared group embodied the fierce independence of the buffalo hunters, a stark contrast to the structured military campaigns of the time. Yet, their confidence belied the complexity and danger of the task ahead, as they prepared to confront the Comanche on their own terms. The expedition was meticulously organized, with a level of precision that reflected the experience of its members. Powderface Hudson, a skilled and dependable leader, kept the roster and ensured that guards were assigned in rotation to maintain vigilance throughout the campaign. Many of the men had served as soldiers in either the Union or Confederate armies, bringing with them a sense of discipline and military structure that shaped the operation. Their approach, grounded in their combat experience, was nothing short of professional. This was not a hastily assembled group, but one of the best equipped and most prepared expeditions ever to confront native warriors, rivaling even the campaigns of the U.S. Army. Among their arsenal were Sharp's buffalo guns, long-range, heavy-caliber rifles that were a hallmark of the buffalo hunters. Through years of relentless practice, these men had mastered the art of precision shooting. They could adjust their aim with remarkable accuracy by merely raising the muzzle, even without altering the graduated rear sights, making them deadly at great distances. The expedition's organization and equipment underscored their determination and confidence, but it also hinted at the increasing militarization of conflicts on the plains. While this may have reflected the hunters' preparedness, it also symbolized the growing intensity of the clash between settler expansion and native resistance, a struggle that was reshaping the plains and eroding the way of life for tribes like the Comanche. As the expedition prepared to set out, another group of hunters, numbering about 15 or 20, arrived from Gotti's camp. Among them was a badly wounded man, Spotted Jack, along with 2 or 3 others nursing lesser injuries. Their tale painted a grim picture of the challenges they had faced. With only 3 horses remaining from their herd, they had narrowly escaped a devastating encounter with a band of Comanche warriors led by Black Horse himself. The previous day, while camped on their way to Rath's rendezvous, the hunters had been ambushed. Black Horse and his warriors, with their war bonnets flying, had stampeded the hunters' entire horse herd, leaving them vastly outnumbered. The hunters estimated there were 60 Comanche warriors against their small group. Despite the overwhelming odds, the hunters opened fire with their buffalo guns, unleashing deadly precision. The heavy-caliber slugs found their marks, sending some Comanche warriors tumbling to the ground, while the others quickly sought cover. For the better part of the day, the hunters remained surrounded, fighting a battle of survival. The sharp cracks of the Winchesters carried by the Comanche echoed against the heavy, dull roars of the buffalo guns, a stark contrast in weaponry. It became evident to the hunters that they were facing the same group responsible for the death of Marshal Soule, as the Comanche were using Sewell's distinctive buffalo gun in the fight. As the afternoon wore on, Moccasin Jim, one of the hunters, spotted the Comanche wielding Soule's gun and took careful aim. His shot rang true and the warrior fell. However, the gun did not stay idle for long, as another Comanche quickly slithered through the bushes to retrieve it and resumed firing. Despite the hunters' efforts, the gun seemed to haunt them, a reminder of their fallen comrade. By the end of the skirmish, the hunters believed they had killed at least 3 Comanche warriors, though they suspected the number might be higher. Their own ranks suffered as well, with 3 or more men wounded. Recognizing the precariousness of their situation, old Gotti finally declared, "Well, boys, this is no place to be tonight. Let's pack up." Braving the intensified fire from the Comanche, the hunters retreated down the trail and managed to rejoin their comrades at Rath's store. Marshal Soule, who had been a universally respected figure among the buffalo hunters, remained a symbol of their cause. John R. Cook, one of the hunters, would later reflect on these events, noting that some among their group now carried bounties on their own heads, a testament to the complex and brutal realities of life on the plains. The expedition finally set out, the hunters resolute as they embarked on a dangerous and uncertain journey across the harsh terrain of the Staked Plains. As they reached the escarpment, their progress was hindered by the steep and rugged incline. The wagons, laden with supplies and ammunition, proved challenging to maneuver. Only after carefully following the base of the escarpment and doubling their teams at a narrow, winding incline did they manage to reach the upper level. It was a grueling effort, but their persistence paid off. At the summit, the hunters discovered a faint Indian trail. Though barely visible, it was enough to reignite their determination. Congratulating themselves on their fortune, they pressed forward, driven by the audacious goal of pursuing a Comanche band far outnumbering their own. The odds were daunting, but these buffalo hunters were no ordinary men. Each carried a heavy rifle, honed their marksmanship through years of practice, and possessed a recklessness born of both confidence and necessity. They were, man for man, among the most formidable individuals to traverse the plains, their grit and skill unmatched. The entire day was spent meticulously tracking the trail, a task requiring sharp eyes and unrelenting focus. By nightfall, they stumbled upon the remnants of a camp. Among the signs of destruction were 2 burned teepees, a stark reminder of the brutality of the conflict. The hunters concluded that at least 2 men had died here, likely victims of the ongoing skirmishes. The traces left behind told a grim story, one that revealed the extent of the damage inflicted by Gotti's group and underscored the relentless violence that defined the region. This discovery served as both a warning and a motivation. For the hunters, it was a glimpse of the peril they were walking into, a battle against an enemy who outnumbered them and knew the terrain intimately. Yet, it also forced their resolve, a testament to the daring spirit that drove them forward despite the risks. By mid-afternoon the following day, José, accompanied by Cook and Luis Keys, rode ahead as scouts and discovered the location of the Comanche camp. The sight of the enemy's village confirmed the hunters' suspicions, but it also brought a heightened sense of urgency. Returning swiftly to the main group, they relayed their findings. That night, with bold determination, the hunters set up camp just 2 or 3 miles from the Comanche village, hidden in a gorge that concealed their wagons and horses. As the hunters prepared their camp, José spotted a lone Comanche rider crossing the canyon, retracing the trail. If this scout discovered the hunters' tracks, the Comanches would immediately abandon their camp, making pursuit nearly impossible. Realizing the critical need to stop him, Luis Keys, a half-Cherokee known for his skill and stealth, stepped forward. He painted his cheeks red, blending into the shadows as he snaked through the terrain to intercept the rider. Before Keys could act, a rifle shot shattered the tension. The Comanche warrior spun out of his saddle, but the shot had come, not from Keys, but from an Englishman who had joined the hunters after Sewell's group disbanded. The wounded warrior scrambled to his feet, running in a desperate zigzag pattern to escape. Yet despite his efforts, the hunters intercepted and killed him, hiding his body among the tall reeds near a waterhole. With the immediate threat eliminated, Hank Campbell gathered the group and issued orders with characteristic simplicity and authority. The wagons and camp equipment would remain in place, while the group split into 3 fighting divisions. Campbell would command one half of the mounted hunters, Limpy Jim Smith the other. Joe Freed was tasked with leading the dismounted men. Old Man Gotti, along with Cook and José, would take on the dangerous role of scouting the Comanches, while Smith's division was assigned to charge into the village and scatter the pony herd. The hunters, brimming with confidence, anticipated nothing less than a decisive victory. However, Campbell gave a final order that revealed the complicated morality of the frontier. He strictly advised the men not to harm women or children unless absolutely necessary. Even in their quest to eliminate the Comanche warriors, there remained a thread of humanity, a recognition that this was more than a fight for survival, but a moment that could define their legacy. As darkness fell, the 3 scouts, with their horses' hooves muffled in grain sacks to silence their steps, ventured cautiously into the canyon. The trail ahead was faint and treacherous, but they pressed on, guided only by brief flashes of light from matches ignited under a blanket to shield the glow. Every sound in the still night, a bird startled into flight, the scrape of a boot on a rock, or even an unguarded cough, held the potential for disaster. The tension was palpable. Any misstep could mean their deaths. Just before dawn, after hours of navigating the perilous terrain, the scouts finally located the Comanche camp. It was a quiet and solemn discovery, for they knew the weight of what lay ahead. Cook, one of the scouts, immediately turned back to alert the hunters, leaving the others to maintain their position near the camp. By the morning light of March 18th, the hunters were ready. Organized into 3 divisions of roughly 15 men each, they positioned themselves at the mouth of the Pocket Canyon, where the Comanche village lay. Hank Campbell, their leader, carefully spaced the mounted platoons about 200 yards apart, with the infantry stationed in between. Every detail of their formation reflected preparation and precision, a reflection of their grim determination. "All right!" shouted Campbell, his voice breaking the morning silence. Limpy Jim Smith, a former road agent turned hunter, echoed the call. "Go for them." The hunters surged forward, their resolve fierce and their strategy clear. It was a moment of singular focus. as the divisions advanced into the canyon, determined to confront the Comanche on their own terms. The hunters' line was composed of seasoned fighters, each with their own story of survival and resilience on the frontier. John Cook, a veteran Indian scout, stood ready alongside Joe Jackson, a former Confederate soldier. Among them were Squirrel Eye, another ex-rebel with a fiery spirit, and Lee Grimes, a skilled marksman. Lewis Keyes, the half-Cherokee, began a solemn war chant, his voice echoing through the canyon as he honored his heritage and prepared for the battle ahead. As the group began to advance, the atmosphere grew electric with tension. Keyes let out a piercing war roar, a cry steeped in the traditions of his Cherokee ancestors, while Squirrel Eye responded with the infamous rebel yell, a sound that once struck fear into opponents on Civil War battlefields. The hunters, shouting with unrestrained intensity, surged forward, driven by their determination to confront the Comanche. As they closed the distance, the Comanche camp came into view. The warriors, quick to respond, began to emerge from their teepees, sprinting toward a low hill that offered them a vantage point. From there, they unleashed a barrage of rapid gunfire, their bullets cutting through the air with deadly precision. At 200 yards, the hunters quickly realized that pressing forward into the storm of gunfire would be certain death. The charge slowed, and the men braced themselves, knowing they were now locked in a battle where every move would determine their survival. Hank Campbell, riding with reckless urgency, led the hunters and shouted for them to fall back to the canyon. But before they could respond, chaos erupted. Joe Jackson, struck by a bullet, collapsed from his saddle, while Lee Grimes fell as his horse was shot out from under him, leaving him with a broken wrist. The situation was dire. Devens and Cook, without hesitation, leaped from their horses and rushed to Jackson's aid. They began dragging him toward a safer position, but a sharp cry from Devens interrupted their efforts. A Comanche bullet had shattered his arm, forcing him to release his hold. "For God's sake," Jackson gasped through his pain, "lie down or they'll get you all." Grimes crawled closer, joining his wounded comrades. The four of them, 3 badly injured, lay exposed, listening to the ominous sound of bullets whizzing overhead. Meanwhile, Campbell's men, entrenched in the draw, were so focused on the fight ahead of them that they failed to notice a new threat creeping up from the north. A band of more than 100 Comanche warriors, moving with deadly stealth, was approaching through the gorge. However, from their perilous vantage point, Cook and the injured hunters spotted the danger. Summoning what strength they could, they opened fire, revealing the ambush. The sudden shooting alerted Campbell's men, who quickly turned their rifles on the advancing warriors. Under the onslaught of gunfire, the Comanche retreated, dragging 6 of their fallen comrades with them. With the immediate threat neutralized, Cook, Devens, and Grimes carefully made their way down from their exposed position, bringing the helpless Jackson with them. However, their opportunity to capture the Comanche herd had slipped away amidst the chaos. Now regrouped, the Comanches mounted their horses and began circling the hunters in wide, menacing loops. Their war cries echoed through the canyon as they darted across openings, forcing the scattered hunters to scramble for advantageous positions. The air was thick with the roar of gunfire. Several horses went down, and one Comanche warrior, his pony shot from under him, sprinted toward a nearby ravine. With only 30 yards to cover, the ground around him exploded as heavy slugs from buffalo guns tore through the soil. His desperate dash ended abruptly as he crumpled to the ground. The hunters, seeing the immediate threat dissipate, shifted their focus elsewhere. Grizzled Hank Campbell and Limpy Jim Smith convened for a quick conference amidst the tension. Campbell, with a grim tone, gave his orders. "Boys, you must leave this place. Smith, take the horses and the wounded men down the side ravine to the long water hole." Despite their earlier confidence, the hunters now faced the harsh reality of their situation. The canyon had turned from a place of strategy to a trap, forcing them to prioritize survival over victory. "The rest of us will crawl to the crest and fire on the camp," Hank Campbell ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos, "until Joe Freed can get his footmen out of the mess they're in." The hunters, once filled with confidence and the belief that they were embarking on a decisive campaign, now found themselves in a starkly different reality. What had begun as an offensive mission aimed at annihilation had turned into a desperate struggle for survival. The tide of the battle had shifted dramatically. The hunters were no longer the aggressors, but a beleaguered group fighting to escape overwhelming odds. Their plans, once brimming with the audacity of confidence, now seemed distant as the harsh reality of the fight set in. Death loomed heavily over them, with each decision holding the weight of survival or finality. The once strategic campaign had devolved into a grim confrontation where the Comanche, resilient and resourceful, exploited every weakness in the hunter's position. The battle was no longer about victory but about endurance, about surviving the relentless assault and finding a way out of the canyon alive. Campbell's sharpshooters crawled cautiously to the crest, their movements slow and deliberate to avoid detection. From their vantage point, they could see the Comanche camp spread out below, approximately 400 yards away. Behind the camp, a large group of horses stood, and among the teepees, squaws were busy loading 50 or 60 ponies with travois, preparing for movement or defense. It was a scene of organized activity, reflecting the Comanche's readiness for whatever might come. To the left, a tall pole stood with a red flag fluttering in the breeze, an unmistakable signal to rally or warn. To the right, another Comanche, using a looking glass, sent flashing messages to his comrades, a clear indication of the tribe's communication and coordination. The sharpshooters opened fire, sending a few long-distance volleys toward the camp. The shots shattered the morning stillness, but the response was swift and fierce. Like a swarm of bees, a hail of bullets buzzed over the hunters' heads as the Comanches returned fire with precision. "Let the camp alone and comb the grass at the crest of this side of it," Campbell ordered sharply, recognizing the danger of staying exposed. The hunters complied, sweeping the crest with gunfire to suppress any threat from nearby positions. In a matter of minutes, they fired nearly 300 rounds, ensuring no hidden enemies could flank them. Once the immediate threat was quelled, attention returned to the camp. The seasoned hunters, calm and methodical despite the chaos, selected targets with care, tobacco quids tucked in their cheeks as they steadied their rifles. Their deliberate fire underscored their experience and composure under pressure. By this time, Joe Freed and his men had rejoined the main group. Among them was Jose, the Mexican scout, whose shoulder bore a fresh bullet wound. Yet despite the pain, Jose managed a grin as he delivered grim news. They had stirred a hornet's nest. Instead of facing the expected 75 or 100 Comanches, the hunters now realized they were up against nearly 300 warriors. To make matters worse, just beyond the bend of the canyon was another camp, home to a large band of Plains-Leapin Apaches, longtime allies of the Comanche. Despite the overwhelming odds, Campbell remained unfazed. A rugged and indomitable Scot, he surveyed the situation with a grim smile. "Maybe we bit off a bit more than we can chew," he remarked with a dry laugh, embodying the audacity and resilience of the hunters, even in the face of near-certain peril. The sound of gunfire suddenly quieted, a momentary pause that filled the air with tension. Something was happening. From the direction of the Comanche, thick black smoke began to rise, curling and spreading rapidly. The prairie grass had been set ablaze, and the fire advanced quickly down the draw, a calculated move to obscure their movements. Out of the smoke emerged a striking young Comanche warrior, bold and fearless. He wore a magnificent war bonnet, its feathers glinting in the dim light, and rode a swift white horse that seemed to fly across the battlefield. The warrior dashed directly in front of the hunters, drawing their attention and fire. Bullets tore through the air, with some hunters firing multiple times in their effort to bring him down. The horse stumbled and fell under the barrage, and moments later, the brave crumbled to the ground, still and lifeless. His sacrifice, though tragic, reflected the courage and determination that defined the Comanche spirit. Farther down the draw, a band of warriors appeared, their lances raised high as they unleashed the haunting Comanche war cry, a sound that, once heard, was etched into memory forever. They halted just within long rifle range, a tactical move designed to distract the hunters from the true attack. Their intention was clear: to divide the hunters' focus and strike where they least expected. Yet the hunters, wary and experienced, remained vigilant. Suddenly, From the upper draw, the smoke parted to reveal the real assault. A powerful and coordinated rush of Comanche warriors swept through the haze, their movements concealed until the last possible moment. As the warriors surged forward, the roar of the hunters' buffalo guns broke the air, their heavy slugs tearing through the charge. Many Comanche fell in the chaos, forcing the remaining warriors to pull back and regroup. As the skirmish subsided, the cries of wounded hunters echoed through the canyon. Their voices, weak yet insistent, begged for water to quench their thirst and ease their suffering. The battle, fierce and unrelenting, had exacted its toll on both sides. Yet the resilience of the Comanche and the fortitude of the hunters ensured the fight was far from over. In the tense aftermath of the Comanche charge through the smoke, a moment of quiet allowed the hunters to regroup and tend to their wounded. Among them, Ben Jackson, brother of the severely injured Joe Jackson, volunteered for a dangerous mission. With a spring located 50 yards away, Ben and Cook crawled toward it, their comrades firing above them to suppress the Comanche. Risking their lives, they returned with their boots filled with water, a precious resource desperately needed by the wounded. Shorty, the druggist, worked quickly to bind the hunters' wounds, easing their pain and offering each of them a stiff drink of fourth-proof whiskey. The grim determination of the group was evident, yet the sense of relief was short-lived. As the wounded drank and the men scanned their surroundings, it became clear that the Indians had vanished. Cautiously, scouts advanced to the position they had held earlier, expecting resistance. What they discovered, however, was shocking. The Comanche, ever resourceful and strategic, had disappeared entirely. Their camp, once filled with activity, was now completely deserted. The Indians had executed a masterful retreat, leaving the hunters stunned. Despite the sudden absence of their foes, the buffalo hunters made no effort to pursue. They were burdened with their wounded, including poor Joe Jackson, who was in critical condition. Even more than their injuries, though, was the shared sentiment of gratitude. They were simply thankful to have survived the ferocious battle. For many, the experience had shaken their resolve, leaving them reluctant to face another such confrontation. Among the wounded, Jackson's condition was particularly dire. The bullet that struck him in the groin had come from Sewell's buffalo gun, which the Comanche had wielded throughout the fight. Jackson fought bravely to endure the pain, making it back to camp with his comrades. Tragically, his injuries proved too severe, and he passed away shortly after their return. His death served as a solemn reminder of the brutal cost of the campaign and the resilience of both sides in this relentless conflict. Weeks after the harrowing campaign, the full extent of its impact began to surface. Captain P.L. Lee of the 10th Cavalry rounded up a group of Comanches near Lake Quamato. Following a brief skirmish in which 4 Comanches were killed, Lee initially reported that Black Horse and his wife had fallen among the dead. However, this account proved to be incorrect. Black Horse, also known as Paco Ria, or Colt, and his wife Topeka, meaning sunrays, lived many years after the battle, eventually passing away in Cache, Oklahoma, around 1900. The leader killed at Lake Quamato turned out to be Eka Wakaane, or Young Red Man, a fearless and defiant warrior. Although not a chief, he was remembered by the Comanches as a brave and reckless fighter who refused to surrender or live on a reservation. His death symbolized the unyielding spirit of the Comanche, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Despite these inaccuracies in the initial report, the campaign had broken the Comanches' ability to wage war, leading them to reluctantly consider surrender. Lee's investigations revealed the staggering toll of the battle. The hunters had killed 31 Comanches, mortally wounded 4 more, and seriously injured 22. Additionally, 15 pack horses were killed during the fighting. Yet, one peculiar detail stood out. Sewell's buffalo gun, wielded by the Comanches during the battle, seemed cursed. Every warrior who used it had met a grim fate. The first to handle it was killed, the second badly wounded, and later, Black Horse's son fell with the gun in his hands. 5 Feathers, another Comanche warrior, used it until the end of the battle, only to share the same tragic fate. The remaining Comanches, superstitious about the weapon's apparent curse, abandoned it. They wrapped the gun in a blanket, along with 2 scalp locks taken from Sewell's head, and left it untouched. Lee's men eventually recovered the gun, a haunting relic of the battle and the sacrifices made on both sides. The Comanches never returned to the warpath after this campaign. Though it was orchestrated by buffalo hunters rather than trained soldiers, the expedition had achieved results that even the most disciplined military unit might envy. The campaign marked the closing chapter in the long and tumultuous struggle between the Comanche and those who sought to dominate the plains.